How are you doing, sir?
Good evening, everyone. Hello, hello.
Hey, hey,
Good evening.
hey, thanks, man. How you doing?
We are blessed. How are you?
Same here.
Good, good to see you.
Um,
And make sure you send me over the those needs for your show as well, like exactly what you need. Just text those to me.
Oh, okay. Yes, please. Yes, I will.
all right, team. So let's go ahead and get started. Wait a minute. Do we have someone from the CEO's office, or do we have chief authorities here? Right?
Yes, he is.
So yeah, I can get started. Okay, thank you. I'm Board Chair Johnette Richardson, and welcome to the Spring Board Budget Session. During last week's public board meeting, the proposed operating budget for school year 23-24 was presented for the board's consideration. The budget is one of the board's most important responsibilities because it does ensure our use of resources that are critical to prepare students for higher education and life-sustaining careers. Tonight, district staff will present the proposed budget to our city schools communities for public opinion and feedback. District staff will document questions you ask during the public comment portion of the meeting, as well as in the meeting chat box, so that a formal written response can be shared with the public after the session ends. We will start tonight's session with a recap presentation from the Chief Financial Officer, Mr. Christopher Doherty, followed by public testimony. If you have not yet done so, please mute your phone. Anyone who does not mute their phone may be muted by the call moderator or removed from the call. Additionally, if you are not a board member or the CEO and her staff, please turn your video off. I will now read a roll call of the board to identify who is on the call. Please identify yourself first before speaking for the record. Commissioner Brooks, Commissioner Coy, Commissioner Esposito,
Esposito present.
thank you. Commissioner Katz Zogby, Commissioner Griffin, I do want to call her name, although I know she's not here for the public. Commissioner Kenyatta Bay,
Kenyatta Bay, present.
thank you. Commissioner McFadden,
McFadden, present.
thank you. Commissioner Reed, Commissioner Roberts,
Present.
thank you. Commissioner Sally, Commissioner Slater Harrington.
Slater Harrington, present.
Thank you. Thank you to my fellow board commissioners who are here this evening. I want to now turn it over to Chief Doherty for the presentation.
Thank you, Chair Richardson, Vice Chair McFadden, and all commissioners. My name is Chris Doherty. I'm the Chief of the Finance Office, and I will be joined by my close friend and colleague, Courtney Desabeyi, who works with me in the Finance Office and is the acting Budget Director. As Chair Richardson said, this will be a shorter version of the FY24 proposed budget, and it will be shorter for a couple of reasons. Number one, the longer presentation from last week is online and available for review, both the document and the recording. And as Chair Richardson said, the bulk of this meeting is meant for the board commissioners and staff to hear input from the community and the public. So we will give a kind of a once over lightly of the proposed budget, but just know that there's more detail both in the longer presentation and in the board book itself. And as this covers a year's worth of funding, this relates to all 7 of the board's priority areas. So you will see on this slide a timeline of this portion of the budget season. I think it's fair to say we're in the height of the budget season, which is April and May. As you can see on this slide, we presented the budget draft to the full Board of School Commissioners last week, and then the feedback in earnest began in that period. At the same time, we have had community outreach meetings specifically about the budget development and input for the budget that go back to December of last year. So that's why we say that although I think it is fair to say this is the height of the budget season, it is certainly not the beginning of the budget season. Yesterday, we released the proposed budget book, which is kind of like an annual report in that it both has tables and summaries and comparisons to previous years, but importantly, it also tries to put some human element to some of what's behind those numbers. And of course, you see also tonight's budget forum, board budget forum for community input. During and after this meeting, we have heightened feedback sessions and, heightened input incorporation, all leading towards the vote to the full board on May 9th. I mentioned the community sessions that we had late last year and early this year, December and January. There were 4 separate meetings of that type. They were well attended, and they were opportunities for whoever went to one or more of those sessions to provide feedback. They included outreach specifically for multilingual families, of which we have quite a few. And it was important to us this year that we actually upped our game a little bit in the ability for families who speak languages other than English to give immediate feedback in their native language. In the past, I think we've been quite good about getting our information out in different languages, not just Spanish, but also French and Arabic and Tigrinya, and also I may be missing one. Swahili, I think, is another one. And in this session, we were pleased that we were also able to I personally don't speak any of those languages. We had facilitators who were able to translate and technology to translate feedback directly, which we think was an important improvement that we will only continue to build on. We also had sessions that focused on community organizations, some aimed at youth and some for a more general audience. But as in every year, everybody is welcome to all those sessions. They're not exclusive to those groups, but sometimes they differ a little bit in their format. What came out of those sessions were the rankings that you see on the right side of that slide. That is to say, the community, both in feedback directly and in surveys that they were presented during those times, as well as I think it was accessible on the webpage, came out with the priority that you see there. Mental health supports being chief among them, followed by school culture and climate, expanded academics, extended learning, tutoring, fine arts, and athletics. They're all important. They're all contained and addressed in various ways in the budget. But we thought since we collected that information and reacted to it, we would also share generally how it stacked up. At the highest level, FY24, the year that we will be beginning July 1st, 2023, can be considered the second full year of Kirwan. The year we're in now, school year 22-23, is the first full year of Kirwan. And in this year that we're in, we experienced a 20% increase in funding. And that was extremely well received and much appreciated, and is being put to outstanding use all this year. For the year FY24 that we're preparing, that we're talking about now, we saw a 6% increase from our current year. And so the second full year of Kirwan, we're still early days. I think in a lot of ways, we and other districts are understanding better and better the various ways that Kirwan will be implemented. Perhaps most notable about the Kirwan funding is that it comes in these dozen categories. These dozen categories, some of which are self-explanatory and others less so, they result in our getting $1.5 billion. That's combined from the state of Maryland and the city of Baltimore. And that's what represents a 6% increase from the year that we're in. Excuse me. And this is another way to look at our FY24 numbers. You'll notice that the biggest portion of the pie, the biggest wedge of the pie in blue is $1.4 billion. Now it doesn't match exactly the 1.5 billion on the previous slide. And here's why. We get funds from different types. And while there are important distinctions to make, both in their timing and their requirements and what's allowable and not, we don't want to spend too much time breaking that down. The net effect of it is general funds are the most flexible or the most broadly usable funds, and we will be receiving 1.4 billion in that category. Restricted funds, as the name suggests, are for certain uses, and they sometimes have time periods that don't match our exact fiscal year. You can get restricted funds that straddle 2 years or sometimes straddle 3 years, and they're for specific purposes. That's why they're called restricted, and that's in the neighborhood of 236 million. And then the final wedge of that pie are what are called enterprise funds. And the best way to think of our enterprise funds are the funds that we collect and use for our meal service across all of our schools. Because as a community eligibility district, we provide meals to all of the children who come walking through our doors, and we're very proud of that. And the annual amount of the Food and Nutrition Service office is projected to be 63 million, as you saw. Another important highlight to give, even at this shorter level, is the amount of funds that we have received in connection with the coronavirus relief and recovery. Most folks, I think, call these three, and we tried to use the terms that most folks use. They're all related to our dealing with and emerging from the coronavirus pandemic. The first one, they're all called ESSER, which is the Elementary and Secondary Emergency Relief Funds. The first one is CARES, Coronavirus Aid Relief Economic Security, and that's called ESSER 1. We were happy to receive $48 million in ESSER 1, and those have been 100% spent or encumbered, which means it's been reserved for spending. And by now, since we drew the data as of March 27th, it could very well be that's 100% spent and no more encumbered. The second tranche of federal funds that we got, and these were historically high amounts of money, so that's why they bear repeating. They came in at different times and they're usable at different times, but as you see from those numbers, they're several $100 million, and we were quite happy to receive them and have put them to a variety of uses. ESSER 1 more focusing on the immediate health needs of our children and staff, all the things that you can think of: masks, test kits, hand sanitizers, dividers, you name it. And when we went into ESSER 2, which is the Response and Relief Supplemental Act, it was both educational recovery became more of the focus rather than just the health concerns. And the last part of our three-part ESSER funding, sometimes called ARP, the American Rescue Plan, or ESSER 3, we received over 400 million of that. It is the section of funds that we have the most remaining time to spend. So as you might expect, we always prioritize the funds that are soonest to expire, and we are well on our way to spending down or encumbering all of those remaining American Rescue Plan funds. Those are in addition to the general funds we talk about, and also in addition to what we call the Kerwin funding. The reason we mention these different types of funds and funding streams is just to remind the public that they do come from different sources, but we don't want to belabor it, because what really matters is what those funds are spent on and how they affect children and teachers in the classroom. And we're constantly braiding our funding when we have more than one funding type, like, for example, with the ESSER funds that I just briefly outlined. And when you hear staff talking about grading, we wanted to give a quick example, like take our high dosage tutoring program. That was a big part of our Restore, Reconnect, and Reimagine efforts that were part of our emerging from the coronavirus pandemic. So high dosage tutoring has been proven to be an excellent way to increase achievement and engagement with students. But how does one pay for it? Well, you figure out how much high dose tutoring is needed, and then you look at your available funds. And in this case, we're contributing in FY24 $25 million to that already successful effort to make sure that it continues its momentum into FY24. It's kind of behind the scenes, but we wanted to show how we do it. Some of that money is coming from the ARP ESSER funds. Some is coming from Title I, which is an ongoing, federal title program, which is one of those restricted funds we talked about it. Some is specific grade 4 ARP tutoring money because there are specific funds that are available for that. Some of it is from what we call TSI in the Kerwin funds, and some of it is a TSI grant. So we give that example just to reassure the public and to remind the public that when activities are put forth, sometimes there's one funding stream that can take care of the whole shebang. Sometimes you need two, sometimes you need more than that. It's just whatever makes the most sense for what our kids need and for the available sources of funds that we have. Frankly, we have seen in other large urban districts that received significant amounts of ESSER or ARP funding. Some districts are, whether urban or suburban, are they may not spend all of their funds. We are quite confident that we will spend our funds on extremely worthwhile uses. Another thing we like to do in any presentation about the budget is to proactively say how much of the budget in question is going to the schools. The schools, of course, is where the children are, where all the action is, where all the bulk of the funds should go. And every year we use the same format so that we can compare across years. The biggest, it's purple on my screen, the biggest wedge of this pie chart is a Ravens purple, and that's 74% of what we call our principal controlled budgets. Just as that suggests, it gives the principal the ability to use her money in her building because she's closest to the staff and the children and knows how best to use it. Another important wedge that we look at is money that, while it's budgeted centrally, it is absolutely spent on behalf of the schools. And that important percentage that we always track is 88% for FY24. For FY23, it was 87%. And so we're pleased that it's not just in the neighborhood of historically consistent, but that it's up a percentage. And as you see, the other slices are everything else added up equals 12%. Very briefly, because I know this is getting a little financy, but we wanted to give a sense of, okay, centrally budgeted. What if we explode that pie wedge into a pie of its own, what's that made up of? And again, we think no surprises here, but they break down as follows. Student transportation is a big one. Utilities, of course, water, electricity, gas, and a variety of other things. Non-public placement is in there, school police, and a variety of other kind of nuts and bolts running the district kinds of things, all of which we closely monitor to make sure, one, we don't have any surprises in our costs and therefore our expenditures, but also to make sure that we stay within the right kind of industry normal or better amounts that should be spent on these things. We're always trying to maximize the amount of money that goes out to the schools. Kerwin certainly is in agreement with that, as they similarly require that in most cases 75% of a given revenue stream be spent at the school level and allocated to schools, and we're quite in agreement with that. I think now I'm going to turn to Courtney, who's going to give you some highlights. One quick comment about the highlights is these are meant to be illustrative, but not exhaustive. That is to say, we want to put some human elements with some of the numbers that are in the board book and in the other presentation, but we don't want someone to read this out of context and think that X investment is the only investment in that particular area. These are just being fleshed out to give some real examples and plans for FY24. Court?
Thank you, Chris. So in this next section, as Chris mentioned, we have what we call investment highlights. So one of the things that we've discussed in the past was, in the budget presentation, the budget book, having, extensive tables that contain lots of numbers that, in the millions, et cetera, but it doesn't give a great sense of exactly how those dollars are being spent or what the investments are. So we made a concerted effort this year to pull out a lot of those highlights, to highlight things that we're funding or prioritizing as a district, regardless, like we said, of the fund source, whether it is ESSER funding, whether it's general fund, whatever the source is, and, kind of call out some of those. So I'm going to go through some of those quickly in the next few slides. So here we have, as was already mentioned, high dosage tutoring. So $25 million for that investment, the continued investment. We've seen some of the results from that over the past year. And, it's something that we're going to continue to invest in moving forward. We have personalized learning. City Schools continues investment in personalized learning for literacy and math for students through high quality online platforms, and that's $6.6 million. Another major one is our investment of $45 million in summer and extended learning. So continuing to invest in extended learning opportunities for students during the summer. Over here, we have our pre-K curriculum investment, which is $1.5 million, and investment in fine arts. So this is particularly, schools were asked as part of their budget guidance to budget within their funding from CPG funding, concentration of poverty, $100 per student to support fine arts programming. So that amounted to about $1.9 million. The reason why that amount is $1.9 million is based on the amounts that the schools received and the amounts that they had available after meeting their other requirements. Secondary success and innovation. So every high school is budgeted for a coordinator to support 9th grade students and ensure they remain on track to graduate from the start. And this is $3.7 million. We have, continuing career readiness. We have investment in state-of-the-art learning environments for HVAC and nursing careers and technology programs at $1.6 million. We have $3.3 million post-secondary success. Every high school is budgeted for a staff specialist to support post-secondary advising. Literacy and math coaching. This is the combined amount, $10.1 million for literacy and math coaches. Every school is budgeted for a literacy coach, and some schools have also opted to budget for math coaches in FY24. Professional development, we have $6.9 million, continuing to invest in new teacher induction, systemic professional development, and leadership focus on academic and wholeness. For recruitment and retention, we have additional staff positions to support processing teacher certifications, resulting in faster service. That's $181,000. Part of the mental health group of investments, we have centrally funded crisis management team. This will support schools with mental health services in times of crisis, $345,000. We have bumped up our investment in the ESBH, Expanded School Behavioral Health Program, to $7 million for FY24. And then we also have investment of $584,000, continuing to focus on morning meetings and advisory periods as a proactive measure to support student social and emotional well-being. Now, this is in addition to our continued investment in positions like our social workers and psychologists, et cetera. It's not, as Chris mentioned, it's not, meant to be an exhaustive list of everything that, we have. Student support, $110,000 for a manager to centrally support students in reentering schools from juvenile services. We also have providing centrally funded home visits for families with additional leads, $375,000. We have continuing to commit to supporting homeless students by providing uniforms, summer programming, and more, and that's about $2.4 million. This slide, we look at some of our athletics and enrichment investments. So we have beginning to hire athletic trainers to ensure the health and safety of student athletes at $643,000. We have CPG funds that schools, again, were provided guidance on budgeting a $50 per student amount to support athletic programming in schools, particularly middle schools, and that's about $2 million. This is independent of other investments that we're making in specifically middle school athletics, in FY24. For enrichment, we also have schools were asked to budget from their concentration of poverty fund, $100 per student to support enrichment extracurricular programming if they have that funding available. So we had another $800,000 in that category as well. And on the slide, we have the facilities investment. Schools will upgrade. We will continue to upgrade health suites at some schools. So that's about $6.8 million. Continue to change air filters at an increased rate, $3.9 million. And we have also an investment in additional maintenance workers of $6.7 million to help to take on more of our maintenance work in-house as opposed to relying on external contracts for our maintenance work. That'll, of course, serve us long-term in terms of being able to reduce costs and also maximize our responsiveness for maintenance-related activities. We have over here investment in a new enrollment system. So to streamline first-time enrollment for Midland High Schools for $350,000, and also investment in infrastructure for technology and expanded Wi-Fi access points at about $4 million. And that also includes digital security, very important. So these were some of the highlights, as we mentioned, not wanting to use too much time for the forum. But as Chris mentioned, here's a timeline of activities that we discussed earlier on. So this forum isn't the last opportunity for feedback. We're still open to taking, feedback. If you have it, send it into the board office. If you send it to the commissioners, they'll forward it to us as well, so we can respond to and answer questions, provide an FAQ or a response that, is comprehensive in terms of getting feedback to the community members and everyone who's interested in terms of what's in the budget, how it's budgeted, and what our plans are for fiscal year 24 prior to the vote on May 9th. And that concludes the slides. So I'm going to turn it back over to the board chair.
Thank you, Courtenay, and thank you, Chief Doherty. We will now move to public comment. Speakers will have 3 minutes each to present to the board. I want to turn it over to our board communications specialist to facilitate this portion of the meeting.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There were no submissions for public comment tonight.
Okay. Thank you. With that, this concludes tonight's Spring Board budget session then. I want to thank the staff and everyone who joined us. My fellow board commissioners, thank you so much for joining. And if there are any further questions or concerns, the public can email the school board office at schoolboard@bcps.k12.md.us. And we will, as Courtenay said, make sure that your questions, your feedback get filtered to the right places in this regard to Chief Doherty and his team to make sure that they respond to your questions. Thank you to the board and thank you to everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.